The year is 164 BC. Emperor Wen of Han sits in his palace in Chang'an and assigns a stack of documents. When he's done, the largest kingdom in his empire no longer exists. No army marched, no battle was fought, no blood was spilled. He did it with paperwork. One moment, the kingdom of Qi sprawled across 70 cities in eastern China. It was a territory so vast, so populous, so powerful, that it could field nearly half the empire's fighting men. The next moment, it was gone, replaced by 7 tiny kingdoms, each too small to threaten anyone. How does a man who entered the capital with 6 followers dismantle a giant without firing a single arrow, a man who was chosen precisely because he seemed weak? The answer is a masterclass in institutional warfare. It begins with a problem every ruler in history has faced. How do you cut down a tree so big it would crush you if it fell? Emperor Wen didn't cut it down. He made it split itself. By 178 BC, Emperor Wen has been on the throne for 2 years. He's neutralized the old generals. Now he turns east, toward kingdoms so large they make his own imperial domain look small. While the Roman Republic's legions are subduing Greece, China's emperor is about to fight a war without armies. But before we watch this surgery, we need to understand what a kingdom was in early Han China, because it wasn't like anything you're picturing. When the Han Dynasty was founded around 200 BC, the first emperor made a bargain. Liu Heng, Emperor Wen's father, would rule the western half of China directly, through a centralized bureaucracy, but the eastern half, he gave it to his brothers, his sons, his generals. They became kings, not ceremonial monarchs, but near-sovereign rulers. Each king had his own capital, his own army, his own tax system, his own laws. He could mint coins, levy troops, appoint officials. The only thing he owed the central emperor was nominal allegiance and an annual report. Think of it like the early Holy Roman Empire, where the emperor technically ruled, but real power lay with dukes and princes, or the relationship between medieval French kings and the dukes of Burgundy, technically vassals, practically rivals. This system worked for about 1 generation. Then it became a nightmare. By the time Emperor Wen took the throne in 180 BC, the kingdoms controlled more land and more people than the central government. The kingdom of Qi was the biggest of them all. 70 cities, a population in the millions, an army that could march on the capital. The man who founded Qi, Liu Fei, was dead. So was his eldest son. But the Qi royal family was still there. Generations of princes who remembered they had almost seized the throne, because they had. When the Liu clan was massacred, the Qi army was already marching west toward Chang'an. Liu Fei's grandson, Liu Heng, believed the throne was his. He only lost it because the generals in the capital switched their support at the last moment to the obscure prince from Dai, our Emperor Wen. So Emperor Wen knew, from day one, that Qi was a loaded weapon pointed at his back. The question was, how do you disarm it? The obvious answer is war. Raise an army, march east, besiege the Qi capital at Linzi. But Emperor Wen didn't have an army he could trust. The generals who controlled the military were the same men who had put him on the throne, and whom he was simultaneously trying to neutralize. If he started a civil war with Qi, those generals might decide he was more trouble than he was worth. So he found another way. A way so subtle, so patient, so perfectly legal, that no one could object, until it was too late. In 178 BC, just 2 years into his reign, Emperor Wen made an announcement. He was going to reward the 2 men, Liu Zhang and Liu Xingju, for their role in crushing the Liu clan. These 2 were grandsons of the founder of Qi, and they had fought bravely during the coup. The whole court expected them to be made kings. Emperor Wen agreed. He made Liu Zhang the king of Chengyang, and Liu Xingju the king of Jibei. Sounds generous, right? Here's the trap. Chengyang and Jibei were not independent territories. They were carved directly out of the kingdom of Qi. Emperor Wen was taking 2 chunks of Qi's land and giving them to Qi's own princes. He was shrinking Qi by 1/3 while making the recipients feel grateful. The reigning king of Qi at the time was Liu Xiang, the man who had almost become emperor. He watched his kingdom being sliced up, and there was nothing he could say. The emperor was honoring his brothers. How could he complain? Liu Heng, the new king of Jibei, soon realized he'd been played. He rebelled and was crushed. His kingdom was abolished and converted into a directly administered imperial commandery. First cut complete. Qi was now smaller, and the emperor had gained a new territory under direct central control. Now, Emperor Wen deployed his most elegant weapon. Historians call it relocating noble estates. Here's how it worked. The king of Qi, like all feudal lords, was surrounded by relatives who served as his advisors, his generals, his administrators. They were his power base. As long as they lived in the Qi capital of Linzi, near the king, they could coordinate, scheme, and mobilize. So Emperor Wen summoned them to the capital, and he offered them something they couldn't refuse: noble titles and estates. He made all 10 surviving sons of the original Qi founder into marquises, hereditary nobles with their own land grants. It was an honor. But their estates were not in Qi. They were placed in Jinnan and Jibei, territories the emperor now controlled directly, hundreds of miles from Linzi. Every single relative of the young king of Qi was relocated. His uncles, his granduncles, his cousins, gone. His maternal uncle, a man named Si Jun, was also moved out. The king was left alone in his palace, surrounded by empty halls. He had no one he could trust to help him govern or plot. The historian Chen Suzhen, who studied these land records in meticulous detail, concluded that the young Qi king could not accomplish anything after this. For 14 years, the records of his reign are blank. He existed, he sat on a throne, but he had no capacity to act. The kingdom was a shell. This is the genius of the move. Emperor Wen didn't imprison anyone. He didn't execute anyone. He gave them titles and land, but by moving them into his own territory, under the watch of his own officials, he transformed them from the king's power base into the emperor's hostages. And then Emperor Wen waited. Not months, not years, 14 years. He waited for the young king of Qi to die without an heir. This wasn't wishful thinking. The king was isolated, probably demoralized, and childless. In 164 BC he died. No son, no successor. According to Han law, when a king died without an heir, his kingdom reverted to the central government. Emperor Wen could have simply absorbed all of Qi, 70 cities, in one stroke, but that would have been too obvious, too aggressive. It would have terrified the other kings and potentially triggered the very rebellion he was trying to avoid. Instead, he did something that looked like generosity. He took the surviving sons of the Qi founder, the same men he'd relocated years earlier, and made them kings. Not one king of a unified Qi, 6 kings, each ruling a tiny fragment of the original super kingdom, plus Chengyang, which was already separate. 7 kingdoms where one had stood. Every single one of these new kings felt grateful. They had been mere marquises, and now they were kings. But the emperor had achieved his real goal. Qi, the monster that once commanded 70 cities and half the empire's soldiers, was now 7 toothless statelets, each ruling maybe 6 or 7 towns. No single one could threaten the central government. And here's the truly diabolical detail. These 7 new kings were all brothers. They had the same father, the same bloodline. You might think that would unite them. But Emperor Wen understood something about brothers. They compete. Each one got a kingdom, but not equal ones. The eldest got the old Qi capital and the richest lands. The younger ones got scraps. Resentment was baked into the arrangement. If they ever needed to unite against the emperor, they'd have to get past their own sibling rivalries first. While he was dismantling Qi, Emperor Wen was running the exact same play against another super kingdom, Huainan. Huainan was ruled by Liu Heng, Emperor Wen's own younger half-brother, the only other surviving son of the dynasty's founder. Liu Heng was arrogant, violent, and increasingly unhinged. He called himself by imperial titles. He issued his own laws. He once murdered a high minister and faced no consequences. Emperor Wen warned him. Liu Heng ignored the warnings. In 174 BC, Liu Heng plotted rebellion, reaching out to the Xiongnu nomads in the north and the Minyue tribes in the south. Emperor Wen had him arrested, stripped of his title, exiled to the remote mountains of Sichuan. But Liu Heng, proud and humiliated, starved himself to death in the prisoner transport cart. Now came the political crisis. A folk song spread across the empire. A foot of cloth can still be sewn. A peck of grain can still be pounded. But two brothers could not tolerate each other. The people were accusing the emperor of killing his own brother. If Emperor Wen simply absorbed Huainan, he'd confirm every suspicion. So he copied the Qi playbook, with a twist. He made Liu Chang's 4 young sons into marquises, but placed their estates far away from the old Huainan power base. They were children, and they grew up under imperial supervision, disconnected from their father's network. Then he waited, for 10 years. Until the same year Qi collapsed, 164 BC, he divided Huainan into 3 small kingdoms and installed Liu Chang's now-grown sons as kings. 3 kingdoms where one had been, each too small to threaten, each king grateful to the emperor who had finally restored their father's legacy. What Emperor Wen did to Qi and Huainan was not warfare, it was surgery. He understood that the most dangerous thing a ruler can do is to create martyrs. If you crush a kingdom by force, you make its king a hero to his people, and a warning to every other king. Resistance hardens, conspiracies multiply. Instead, he used a system against itself. Every move was legal. Every move was defensible. Rewarding loyal princes? Who could object? Granting noble titles to the king's relatives? That's generosity. Waiting for a king to die without an heir before restructuring his domain? That's just following the law. Dividing a kingdom among the sons of its founder? That's family values. He never issued an order that said, I am reducing your power. Every order he issued said, I am honoring you. But the result was the same. The super kingdoms that had threatened the dynasty were broken into pieces too small to matter. This is the essence of institutional power. When you control the rules, you don't need to use force, you just need patience. You wait for the rules to create the outcome you want, and then you sign the paperwork. Emperor Wen has dismantled 2 super kingdoms without firing a shot, but there's one kingdom he won't touch. The richest, most heavily armed, most dangerous of them all, the kingdom of Wu. Its king Liu Bi has copper mines and salt fields. He pays his soldiers double. He charges his people 0 taxes. He's been nursing a grudge for 20 years, ever since the emperor's own son beat his heir to death with a chessboard. And Emperor Wen's response? He gives the man a walking stick, and gives his own male lover a mountain of copper. Next time, copper and salt.